Hi, everybody. Welcome to Mormonish. I'm Rebecca.
And I'm Landon.
And we have a familiar face, a returning guest, our friend, Kendel Christensen. How are you, Kendel?
Hello, doing great. Very excited for today's presentation.
Yeah, this is going to be wonderful. You may remember, Kendel, from a couple months ago, How Minds Change, one of the most, I would say, revelatory podcasts we've ever done with the information in that. And I'm going to link that in the show notes again, in case you haven't had a chance to watch that with Kendel. He's just an amazing presenter and so knowledgeable. And that was a mind-blowing podcast. But, why stop at one mind-blowing podcast? We have another one for you, don't we?
That's right.
Yeah, it's all going to happen. That's right. Now, tonight, I'm wearing my Fairview United shirt. You can buy t-shirts, I think, still on their website, but a very kind Mormonish viewer. And I just have to shout out to you again. She knows how I like to wear the dreaded evil porn shoulder. And this just arrived in the mail. I thought, oh, should I cut one up? This is professionally hemmed. It fits perfectly. I mean, seriously, this just makes me so happy. So I was wearing it on the newscast and I'm like, I'm keeping it on for the podcast. So thank you again for this amazing gift. I don't know, Landon, do you think you'd look good in a Fairview white beater? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd look as good as you do with that. I wouldn't mind the porn shoulders, but
yeah, we'll see. We'll see if somebody sends you a Fairview.
I think everyone else would.
Yeah, it's true. Beauty's in the eye of the beholder. Whatever makes you feel good, whatever makes you feel happy, that's right. So, all right. Well, we have another wonderful podcast today. And again, it seems like every time we have Kendel on, it's because he's given an incredible presentation at the other hobby that Landon and I have, and that's the Good Book Club, which is a virtual reading group for post and nuanced Mormons. And it's been going for about 5 years. We read a book a month every second Sunday, 11 a.m. Mountain Time. And we have members of our club who are all over the world choose books and volunteer to present if they want. And sometimes we have such a good presentation that we're like, you know what? We need to take this to a wider audience. This is an amazing, awesome concept. And we discuss everything through the lens of Mormonism. The books that we read are not necessarily Mormon books, but through the lens of Mormonism. Like I said, post and nuanced Mormons are in this virtual group. And it's amazing how relevant everything is and how it's such great takeaways. And this presentation, especially, Landon, didn't you feel had some really good insights?
Yeah, it was a kind of a fun book too. There wasn't anything revelatory in there. I think most of it is common sense, and we'd all kind of say, oh, yeah, that's right. But a lot of times we don't think about it.
Yes.
But it was presented in kind of a fun way as in the method that he uses to present it.
Yeah, I agree. So we're just going to let Kendel take it away, and he'll be giving the presentation, and we'll, of course, be asking questions and having a little discussion. But I think you guys are really going to like this. So why don't we share slides, and we'll tell everybody what book it is we're going to be basing our episode on today.
All right. Yeah, the book is by Mark Manson, The Subtle Art of Not Giving an F, a counterintuitive approach to living a good life. That's kind of how Mark Manson stylizes himself, as he's an anti-self-help guru. And a lot of this book, like Landon was saying, is kind of a repackaging of things we've probably already been familiar with. But I really do like the way that Mark packages some of these ideas.
I know, and lest you think that we as post-Mormons are not comfortable saying the F word, we would say it all day long, wouldn't we? But we don't want to get demonetized. So we will be saying F. We will not be using the Mormon versions of frick and fetch and flip. And am I missing any? I had Mormon teenagers, so
yeah,
we're not going to do that. That's triggering.
In the LDS church, they don't call it demonetize; they call it demonize.
Demonize. Okay,
yeah,
there you go.
If you're not comfortable with the F word, this probably is not the book for you, because it's used over and over and over again. So if you do decide you want to read this book, just be aware of that. But it can make for a fun read if you read it in the intent that it was written.
Great info. So yes.
Yep. So this presentation will go over not letting petty things bother you, the degree to which we are all self-deluded, what we should give an F about, and what really matters to happiness. So I'm a disciple of Brene Brown. My focus over at learnedempowerment.com and my YouTube channel is about collecting life-changing truths. And I really like how she puts this. Midlife is when the universe gently places her hands on your shoulders, pulls you close, and whispers in your ear, I'm not screwing around. All of this pretending and performing, these coping mechanisms you developed to protect yourself from feeling inadequate and getting hurt, has to go. Your armor is preventing you from growing into your gifts. I understand you need these protections when you were small. I understand that you believed your armor could help keep you secure from all the things you needed to feel worthy and lovable, but you're still searching and you're more lost than ever. Time is growing short. There are unexplored adventures ahead of you. You can't live the rest of your life worried about what other people think. You were born worthy of love and belonging. Courage and daring are coursing through your veins. You were made to live and love with your whole heart. It's time to show up and be seen. And part of that journey, I think, is learning not to care so much about what other people think and not give an F about so many irrelevant things that will sap your energy and your good spirits in a day.
I love that. I hadn't heard that quote before. And I feel like that, I mean, that fits right into my post-Mormon journey, because literally middle age, 56, I woke up one morning and said, I just don't think I want to do it anymore. You know, all the reasons that I had made myself do it and convinced myself I had to, and all the people that I didn't want to disappoint. There's a point where you just go, what else is there? So that pretty much encapsulates what happened to me. It literally was a waking up in bed Sunday morning moment.
My life and my values weren't working. And I was like, okay, let's throw out what doesn't work and let's find what's really real. What's reality? What actually works, not just because someone said so, but because it's testable and it's been proven time and time again. That's what I'm searching for.
And not just what works for me.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah. All right. So Mark talks about a few problems in the book, and he talks about lacking. And again, he's an anti-self-help guru, so he kind of bashes that industry a little bit. So he says, conventional life advice is fixating on what you lack. It lasers in on what you perceive your personal shortcomings and failures already to be, and then emphasizes them for you. You learn about the best ways to make money because you feel you don't have enough money already. You stand in front of the mirror and repeat affirmations saying that you're beautiful because you feel as though you're not beautiful already. You follow dating and relationship advice because you feel you're unlovable. You try goofy visualization exercise about being more successful because you feel as though you aren't successful enough already. Ironically, this fixation on the positive, on what's better, what's superior, only serves to remind us over and over again what we are not, what we lack, and what we should have been but failed to be. After all, no true happy person feels the need to stand in front of a mirror and recite that she's just happy. She just is. So again, like, this book is trying to get you to pull back from what everyone else is saying is important and to give an F about, and to really just like not focus on those things as much and learn to focus on the things that will make you really happy. And on page 5, he says, go ahead.
I was going to say, it kind of strikes me as people, you know, you're protesting too much. You're trying too hard. You know, I'm successful. I'm rich. I'm happy. I'm beautiful. It reminds me of testimony meeting. I know it's true. It is true. I know it's true. It's like you're just the mantra trying to convince you of something that in your heart or in your brain, you're just not exactly sure of. So it's very interesting.
And like that was one of the reasons when I realized my life wasn't working, is like, you know, I came from a background where I was told, do this and this and this and this and this and this and this, and then you'll be happy. And I couldn't do all the things 100% of the time. I was pretty dang close, but I just couldn't keep up with all the things. And so I was just like, okay, like, I guess I'll never be happy. There was too much expectations on me.
I would say, Kendel, that you are probably a person that you were pretty close to perfect. If you watched our last episode, when Kendel wanted to be a seminary teacher and they said, you need to be married first, he got married. I mean, he was trying to be perfect. So that is quite the story.
Yep. And on page 5, he says, while there's nothing wrong with being good at business and multiple things in your life, the problem is that giving too many Fs is bad for your mental health. It causes you to become attached to many superficial and fake things, to dedicate your life to chasing a mirage of happiness and satisfaction that others are giving you. The key to a good life is not giving an F about more, it's giving an F about less, giving an F about only what is true and immediate and important. And what I would add is what Landon already said, who you, like discover who you are and what's important to you.
Yep,
I think this lacking is really the first thing that most people leaving Mormonism experience, because they start saying, oh my gosh, I'm lacking faith. I'm lacking a testimony. I'm lacking the conviction to continue to go to church. I'm lacking the conviction to go to the temple every week. And then everyone else, if you express that, everyone else is going, oh my gosh, you're losing your faith, and are telling you everything you're lacking. And I remember the most freeing day was when I was reading. I'd been studying for years, and I'd been going through, and I was actually reading in Rough Stone Rolling, and I was reading, and I turned the page, and I said, oh my gosh, they've been lying to me my entire life. This is what they told me wasn't true. And I said, it's all bullshit. And as soon as I set down the book, this wave of relief came over me, because I'd finally said, I don't care. I now know. And at this point, I don't care anymore what they've told me. I can now release it. And so I think lacking is really the first thing you experience, and it's the first thing you have to overcome, is you have to finally say, I don't give an F anymore that I'm lacking that. I know what I know, and I don't care what anyone else says.
Absolutely. I'll never forget when I mentioned to a counselor some of the things that I was, really bothered by and doubting. And guess what the first thing he asked me was? He was like, how often do you go to the temple, Kendel? As if like, okay, like twice a month isn't enough. We'll try 4 times, there's never this point where you reach enough to be guaranteed happiness, which is why I really like this book, because he shows very clearly, we've already talked about, that always in pursuit of more and more is a recipe for unhappiness. And lesson number 1 of this book is to embrace your flaws and imperfections.
No, and see, I just have to say, oops, did you start that one quick thing? If what you just said, the whole point of the church is to achieve perfection. They try to give you these little things like, oh, just do the best you can. It's perfection. It's always been perfection, and that's baked in, and that's unattainable. And you can't ever embrace that. You can't stop trying. You can't give up. There's always more, and you dig yourself deeper and deeper and get more and more unhappy just trying to achieve that, because you can never accept yourself. It's never okay. So this is an important message.
It really is. And again, like I said, like this can be part of the curriculum of like rediscovering and throwing out old beliefs and getting new beliefs that are more functional and happifying in your life.
The big idea to take away from chapter 1, and this is the most underlying thing in the book and one of the most underlying things on Amazon Kindle ever, is something called the backwards law. And the backwards law originally comes from Alan Watts, but I rephrase it in my own way. And I say that the pursuit of positive experience is itself a negative experience, and the acceptance of a negative experience is itself a positive experience. So I go on and give a number of examples of the backwards law. I say that the idea is that the more that you pursue feeling better all the time, the less satisfied you become, as pursuing something only reinforces the fact that you lack it in the first place. So the backwards law introduces the central theme of the book, which is that negativity is actually the path to positivity. Most people's assumption is they just want the positive experiences from life, but it's actually the tolerance and acceptance of the negative experience that leads to the positive experience. And I will end up spending pretty much the entire book expanding upon this.
Yeah, one of the biggest sources of angst was that scripture in Mosiah that said, blessed, or let us consider the blessed and happy state of those that keep all the commandments, for they are blessed in things temporally and things spiritually and things of the field, all those things. And I was like, gosh, like if following the commandments hasn't led me to happiness, like, what, I'll never be happy, or at least I have to fake that I'm happy. It was just all these things. But I remember when I had lost my testimony, I hadn't realized it actually yet at the time. I was just going through like a lot of existential dread stuff. I didn't know who to trust, who to believe. And I read the book, No Nonsense Buddhism.
Yep.
And he just said a line in there that was like, you don't have to be scared or avoid suffering. You can embrace suffering as a friend and a companion that will be with you. And I was like, oh, I don't have to be perfect. And it was just like Landon said, it was like this weight that just lifted off of me, because especially in my family, there's this pressure to always maintain appearances.
Right.
It's never okay to answer the question, like, how you doing, with anything less than, oh, I'm doing good. You can't go there. It's not okay, because this is the true church. We have all the answers and you're supposed to be happy all the time. It's literally in our scriptures.
No, it is. And unfortunately, everyone's like, oh, people are so fake, And my kids used to say that about me. I'd be having a hard day or something's going on at home and somebody from church comes to the door and I'm like, hi, hello, great, sure, come in. My kids would always call me on that. I'm like, no, you don't understand. That's what you do. You don't ever let anybody know, what's really happening, because even if it's something out of your control, you're not perfect, right? And there's this kind of idea that if something bad is happening, is that because you're not faithful enough? I mean, I know they try to steer away from that.
You're not going to the temple enough.
But exactly, but it's there. And when you do express concerns or doubts, I think you had that experience too, Landon, and talking to leaders. Well, have you read the Book of Mormon more? Have you done this and that? So yeah, it's like this never-ending cycle of just digging you deeper into being very unsatisfied and very unhappy until you realize what's really going on. And some people never do. Other people, it's very dramatic.
I like this. I like this point because it turns, so often we learn, positivity. You got to be positive. Only keep the positivity in your life. As a naturally pessimistic person, I was glad to hear someone say, embrace the negativity, because, in my profession, negativity is what you want. You want someone who's going to say, what are all the problems that are going to happen, that could possibly happen, and how can I keep them from happening before they happen? That's the person I want running a project for me, because that's when you lose money. If it's someone that just says, it'll all take care of itself, it'll all work out in the end, and they don't anticipate any problems or look for what could possibly go wrong, that's when you have accidents. That's when you go over budget. That's when it doesn't get done on time because you're expecting that they'll just show up without coordinating with them. All bad things happen when you think positively. When you think negatively and you solve the problem before it happens, you go, ooh, that didn't happen. And you move on to the next thing. And I often point out, who wants to get on board with a airline pilot who is overly positive? He's checking the fuel and he goes, yeah, I think we'll make it. You don't want to be on board with that guy. You want someone who's got some negativity and says, wow, I almost ran out one time. I think I'm going to carry a little bit extra this time because that's a bad thing that happened to me before. So you got to embrace, I'm not saying don't have any positivity in your life, but I'm saying you have to embrace both sides. But so often in the church, only positivity. That's the only thing you can have, because showing anything other than positivity, is counter to Christ. And therefore nothing bad could ever happen in your life, because that means Satan is at work, not Christ.
Exactly. It's interesting you phrase it that way. On page 29, Mark Manson says this: that's what's so dangerous about a society, or I would add organization, that coddles itself more and more from the inevitable discomforts of life. Listen to this. We lose the benefits of experiencing healthy doses of pain. We need those doses. Otherwise, we disconnect ourselves from the reality of the world around us.
Wow, that's powerful. It makes me think of how you can never have contention, any kind of disagreement, healthy disagreement, debate. Stop that. That's contention. I can't even tell you how many times I had one sister, we fought, we disagreed, but that's what you do with siblings. You're supposed to learn to work things out, and then you take that into adulthood. And my dad would read all the scriptures about contention and Laman and Lemuel, and we were not really allowed to work things out like that. We just had to kind of back away, swallow it, and whatever. So, and I see that as a life skill that I don't have. I don't ever push back on anybody. rarely, I don't ever fight anybody or express my opinion, in my personal interactions like that. And I never learned to embrace contention in a healthy way.
Yeah,
I think that's
you
sort
just
of a
turn it
church
off
thing.
like a light
Yeah.
switch. You just
Yeah, like a light
suppress those
switch.
disagreements down and you put on a good face. That's
Yeah.
the name of the game.
It is. It's crazy. Wow.
I know like probably half a dozen couples that have claimed, oh, we've never had an argument.
Yeah. Yeah. Because they won't face anything that's real. That's exactly it. Because you don't want to. You're encouraged not to go there. And that's true of, in a faith crisis. It's why it's so difficult. I think you don't learn to process your own emotions, your own thoughts, work through them. What does it really mean? What does it mean going forward? Can I admit that I might have misjudged something in the past? That's contention too, kind of internal struggle or contention. So we're just not hardwired, I think, growing up in the church to deal with that.
And that's what makes it normal. It's like the Princess Bride. Life is pain, just like accept it, like that's a fact.
Yep. This is
okay.
good.
So another like misconception of the book that I just want to take care of is like, you might read the title and kind of Landon already addressed this, but not giving an F isn't about just like not caring about anything. He says only psychopaths are that way. We all can and should and do care about things. Rather, the key about the principles of not giving an F is not giving an F about everything and everyone. I mean, I remember, when I was in the church and like every assignment, every calling, every little thing, I was just told to like treat this as so important, and I would never have time for the things that I wanted to do. Like it was more than a full-time job to please all these people. And I tied that into my worth and my spiritual worthiness. And so I could never really escape that treadmill of pleasing others and like not being able to say no and disappoint people. And I was not happy with that.
Yeah, and that causes extreme burnout at church. I was over on Faithful social media the other day, like I often am, and some couple had written, oh, we just joined a ward and we don't have kids yet. We got put in the nursery. We're trying to do it. We're burnt out. We're lonely. We're not meeting anybody. We're off in a corner. We want to talk to the bishop. We're just struggling. It's affecting our relationship as a couple. We just absolutely fear Sundays. We're depressed. And the comments were all, oh, you can do it. Think about magnifying your calling. You're okay. Just push forward. Think about the kids. Can you ask the bishop for help? There really wasn't anybody that said those are legitimate feelings. And if it's affecting your relationship as a newly married couple, you probably need to do something about stopping that. That's not an option. Not an option.
Right. And you just captured the both sides of the principle. So it's about not caring about everything and everyone that is, placed upon you. And the other half, if I were to say one idea from this book, the big idea is you choose to value the things that are important to you. You have a choice to prioritize the things that bring you happiness, that adds your unique value to the world. You don't have to please all these other people saying, this is so important, you should do this, should, etc. The big point of the book is to value better things. That is the big idea. So just once again, on page 16, he says, when we say, damn, watch out, Mark Manson don't give an F, we don't mean that Mark Manson doesn't care about anything. On the contrary, we mean that Mark Manson doesn't care about adversity in the face of his goals. He doesn't care about pissing some people off to do what he feels is right or important or noble. The point isn't to get away from all the SHIT, it's to define the SHIT that to you is worth giving yourself to. The point isn't to get away from it, it's to find the things that you enjoy dealing with. So like, if I were to go back in my previous life, like I would have loved to just one time say, brother so-and-so, like this volunteer activity is really important, but this other thing that I want to do, it's more important. I just would have loved to have said that just one time.
Eventually you did.
Eventually you did. Yeah. And that's kind of the end game here is we all kind of went, there are things out there that we give an F about more than these things here that we're told to give an F about. And of course, we give an F about family and friends and what they think, but eventually we give an F more about those other things that we think we want to experience. And that's where we're all at. And then people look at you like, how dare you not give an F anymore? And you're like, but I do, just different things. So that's so hard to convey to people.
It is, because they take the one and impute all these other judgments upon it without really getting to your real intent.
Yeah.
And often they say you've changed, and really you haven't changed, just your priorities have changed.
Yep.
Exactly. Oh, that was
have changed.
Poetry. Yes, absolutely. But again, because they're kind of programmed to prioritize other things, the fact that you are different and prioritizing different things, they judge that as bad.
Yeah.
And they don't have to. They can just say, it's not bad, it's just different. But in their, belief system, there's black and white, good and bad about just about everything. It's a torturous way to live, I think, now that I am seeing it from the outside. Okay, so again, here's the big idea about valuing better things. It's not about being indifferent.
The give a fuck framework. And I have 3 subtleties of not giving a fuck. So subtlety number 1 is not giving a fuck does not mean being indifferent. It means being comfortable with being different. And kind of the conclusion that arises is that if you give a fuck about a few very important things, then the small things cease to bother you so much.
So short and sweet, there's the summary. Again, care about things, don't be a psychopath, don't not give an F about anything, but just choose to prioritize the things that are really, truly the things that are most important to you. And again, that's why I love this book, is I'm in the middle of cataloging, like, what is important to me? What do I want out of my life? My whole life was laid out for me, and now I can do anything I want. And I'm honestly still struggling with that, which is why I'm cataloging this process on my YouTube channel. But it's also really empowering to be like, wow, I can dedicate my life to anything I want, not temple work or, all these other things that like really weren't helping me that much.
Yeah.
You're told to care. You're told to give an F. Exactly. And that's my whole argument. You're told so many things. There's no room for anything else. Nothing. And you can't even admit to yourself half the time that it isn't what you'd prefer to do or even what you believe.
Yeah, so many times in the church, I've seen people who really have no hobbies, and I was included in that. And then you get out and you go, I don't have any hobbies because all your time was spent doing church stuff and giving time to the church. And so now you actually get to explore and say, what are my hobbies? What is it that I enjoy doing? And that's a great, that's one of the positive sides of leaving.
Absolutely. And now it is becoming easier for me to say no, because I do have other things that are important to me. Like, no, I have this hobby, or I have this person I'm committed to, or this, club. I've joined a lot of meetup.com groups, and I love just exploring my interests. And it's just been a whole renaissance of rejuvenating my life. I love it.
No, and isn't that funny that it does become easier to say no just because you start giving an F about these other things so much that you can't imagine being pulled back from it, Like when I first, stepped away and stopped going on Sunday and discovered all kinds of other things to do on Sunday, that was very meaningful to me, a peaceful day, the things that I chose to fill it with. And at the beginning, I would have some people text me, oh, can you just fill in your calling? Can you just come one time? And I even say to Landon, because we became friends right about the time I left, what should I do? They're asking me. And remember, Landon, you just said, just say no. He was much farther along the path. And I would text, oh, I don't think I can, or I'd make up an excuse, But as time progressed and the things that I gave an F about, these special Sundays that for me, I was doing these extremely fulfilling things that I'd never done before. When I would get a text, even a year or so later, where somebody probably trying to do a reach out, but would ask me, oh, could you come do this or present this? I would just say, oh, no, thank you. I mean, it was so easy because nothing was going to make me feel bad or take me away in any way from what I now valued so much. And it makes it so easy. It's so innate. When you find what you care about, you protect it. And it's very easy to just say very politely, no, thank you. That's it. Done.
Absolutely. I've been shocked, though, at the reaction that I
Yeah.
get from people when
Oh, yeah.
I very reasonably say, sorry, not this time.
Yeah.
And just how some people in my life react to that, like the LDS culture and boundaries, and
No
respecting
boundaries.
other people's choices. Like there's a lot of work to do there.
Yeah, and I think we have an episode planned sometime in the future to talk to Kendel about boundaries. He has got a lot of good info on that, and that's something that we all need to understand more about as we navigate where we are.
Oh yeah, I have a whole course about it. And
Yep.
this clip, I've scoured the whole internet because Mark Manson makes reference that a lot of these ideas are Stoic and Buddhist in origin. And I really like the channel Philosophy Tube by Abigail Thorne. And she goes over this principle of, like if you value petty things, you're adding a lot of suffering to your life. You need to really examine the things that you give an F about and change them to be more reasonable. So that's this clip.
Number one, the dichotomy of control. This one's pretty simple. Control the things you can control. Don't worry about the things that you can't. If you're an addict or you know an addict, you might recognize this idea from the Serenity Prayer popularized by Alcoholics Anonymous. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. The key for Stoics is there's only one thing you can really control, and that is your judgments about the world. For example, Marcus says, imagine somebody insults you and you get really angry. Take a step back. Have you really been hurt by what they said? No. What's happened is they've insulted you and you've made a judgment, something like, and you've reacted to that, not the insult itself. You can change that judgment if you want to, and you can let that anger go.
If you are pained by any external thing, it is not the thing that disturbs you, but your own judgment about it. And it is in your power to wipe out this judgment now.
That's not an easy thing to do, which is why you have to work at it. This is something that other Roman Stoics like Seneca and Epictetus said too. You've got to train yourself to take that step back and examine your feelings every time you experience a strong emotion.
So I think that's a really, really powerful idea. Again, Mark Manson makes this point. I just liked how she makes it a little bit more clear and transcendently. I mean, think about how that applies when you're in the church, if you're in the process of leaving, if you've already left and you're trying to set boundaries, like anytime where you're anxious or afraid, you can say, wait, what am I really thinking about what will happen? What's the belief underlying that feeling? And can I change that belief? Like, it sounds so simple, but I'm here to tell you, in the 2.5 years I've gone through this, it is one of the most helpful processes I have ever found. All right. So again,
Great.
just our beliefs and values and expectations directly affect the degree to which we are bothered by something. That's called the dichotomy of control. And Mark Manson makes slight reference to it in his book. Okay, so let's get to some solutions. We've already kind of touched on this, but the basic big idea solution is to care better, value better things, don't be petty, don't waste your time on things that you can't control. All of those things are choices you are making. And when you care about all those little things, like, that's your problem, and you need to change the way that you care.
Subtlety number 2 is to not give a fuck about adversity. You must first give a fuck about something more important than adversity. So if you're always worrying about what people think about you, the problem is not what people think about you. The problem is you don't have anything better to worry about. If you're always worried about how much money you have, the problem is not how much money you have. The problem is that you don't have anything better to worry about.
Yeah, so on page 18, he says, the problem with people who hand out Fs like ice cream at a gosh dang summer camp is they don't have anything more F-worthy to dedicate their Fs to. If you find yourself consistently giving too many Fs about trivial shit that bothers you, or your ex-boyfriend's new Facebook picture, how quickly the batteries die in your TV remote, missing out on a 2-for-1 sale of hand sanitizer, if those things bother you, you don't have much going on in your life to give a legitimate F about. That's your real problem. not the hand sanitizer, not the TV remote. I once heard an artist say that when a person has no problems, the mind automatically finds a way to invent some. I think what most people, especially educated, pampered, middle-class white people, this is Mark Manson's words again, not mine, consider problems are really just side effects of not having anything more important to worry about. It then follows that finding something important and meaningful in your life is perhaps the most productive use of your time and energy. Because if you don't find something that's meaningful, your F's will be given to meaningless and frivolous causes by default.
As you said that, it made me think. This is actually a way that I can understand better why our believing members, our believing family, care so much about what we're doing. It's because they don't have anything better to care about. They grew up in the church. To them, your salvation is what they care about. Their salvation is what they care about. They're so involved with the church that salvation is the only thing they have to care about. What the church teaches is what they have to care about. So when you do something that they don't like, they care about it. And you're going, why the heck are you even bothering me about this? What difference does it make to you what I'm doing? But they care about it. When you leave, you start caring about, wow, now what's important in my life? What do I care about? You're trying to find a new way and a new path, and you start caring about that. And, sometimes you care about what your family says, but there comes a point where you say, I don't care anymore what they think. You might get a drink, or you might drink coffee, and at first you're hiding it. You're like, oh, just hot chocolate, but then you start saying, I don't care if my family knows I drink coffee, so then you start drinking it in front of them. Of course, they have nothing better to care about because all they care about is your salvation. But you have other things. That cup of coffee isn't your worry. You don't care about that. You're caring about, okay, what is my new social group got to look like because, I've been kicked out of this one. So you have a lot of other cares, and those don't become so deep. But it does help to understand the reason that everyone has to harp on whatever I'm doing is because they really have nothing better to give an F about than what I'm doing.
Do you know what the greatest example is of that? The word Mormon. They care so much about that. And, how many of us have been in a heartfelt conversation with someone and we accidentally say, oh God, when I was a Mormonite, let me stop you right there. It's the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Ooh, look, I raised my hand.
You did.
No, do you know what I mean? I know when you do that with the signal, hey, but do you know what I'm saying? To give an F about that, no one gave an F about that until the prophet announced that you need to give an F about that. And now I would say it's the number one thing people give an F about. We hear this all the time, or you'll post something, Mormons, well, we're the church. It's ridiculous. Talk about a small, teeny thing to care about. And yet you're constantly shut down and reminded by friends and family that that's the most important thing right there. And you're not in line with it. And they care a lot. Don't you think? I mean, it's just crazy.
Yeah, that dovetails perfectly into a quote on page 88. And Landon, will you read that for us? It's exactly what you said about the cup of coffee. Just like all these other things in your life that they could care about, and they just fixate on that. Go ahead.
Yeah, surpass the petty. When we have poor values, that is poor standards, we set for ourselves and others, we are essentially giving an F about the things that don't matter. Things, in fact, make our life worse. But when we choose better values, we are able to divert our Fs to something better, towards things that matter, things that improve the state of our well-being, and that generate happiness, pleasure, and success as side effects. This, in a nutshell, is what self-improvement is really about. Prioritizing better values, choosing better things to give a fuck about, because when you give better fucks, you get better problems. And when you get better problems, you get a better life.
Yes. Like the coffee problem versus all the other problems that you could solve together and not divide each other. I mean, it's so myopic to me, but
I think that's what so many
system.
Yeah, I think that's what so many of us in the church who have left the church start saying is, why are we giving an F about building temples and doing genealogy work and taking these names and baptizing them for, people who have died in the past?
Yeah.
Why aren't we taking that money and giving an F about the children who are
Right.
starving or the homeless or, there's so many problems in the world, and yet we're solving a make-believe problem, that people who have died have to now get baptized for the dead. What if we gave a better F about something like, starving children or abused children or abused women, or there's so many things.
Or even temple building. Think about it. What if they gave an F about communities and people instead of, ripping communities apart with, not following, I'm wearing my shirt, so I have to say it, not following zoning or codes. That's the F they're giving at all costs, right? Instead of the F about people, real people, living people, people who are there, who they could make a good impression on if they did it right. So you're absolutely right. When you start thinking about that, what do you give an F about? You really can start to almost see what a person is really about by where they put their Fs.
Yeah, it reminds me, one of my best friends, fellow seminary teacher, both of us never thought we would ever consider leaving the church, but that is actually what broke her shelf. Is during COVID. I mean, we're the true church. We have a prophet, someone who claims to speak for God, be the representative for God and Jesus Christ on the earth. Here we have a global catastrophe. And what's the church's response? Do they, quadruple their outreach? Do they have, fireside chats to give comfort and help to people? Or do they just do business as usual, except like they retract their programs to save money? I mean, she just could not get over the response to a global problem if this is the true and living church,
Yeah, they actually retracted themselves for months. You didn't hear anything from them. They
nothing.
went into hiding so they didn't catch COVID.
No guidance. And you look at some of the other churches at the time, their pastors were out, they were among the people, they were doing infomercials, they were having online church right away. There was comfort. They were acknowledging it. I think that was the biggest thing. No acknowledgement. Like, come on, I know you're supposed to be in, but not of the world, but this is the world. This is what's happening.
Oh, I'll never forget that not only did they not do that, I remember Elder Holland in the conference sometime in 2020, maybe it was 2021, he chastised in general conference the church for complaining too much.
Yeah.
He's like, we're all so blessed, we should not be complaining. I was like, we are in the middle of a crisis. Like, I was offended.
Yeah. Well, the good news about that crisis is that it gave everybody a chance to step away and their brains to kind of unclog and dewire. And then a lot of people really did decide what they gave an F about, and they did step away from organized religion and made a different choice for themselves.
Yeah, I think historians can look back on that time period and aptly call it the great realignment of priorities. Oh, we're not going to church. Oh, we have all this time. We're not doing callings. Oh, I'm going to realign my life. And yeah, in my local ward, I think it was about 30% didn't come back.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they started finding out that they got to do other things, and they said, wow, I give more of an F about this than I do about that.
Yeah, and most of it was other things with their family. I can't tell you how many posts I read where people said, I'm spending time with my kids on Sunday. We're not fighting about getting into your church clothes and rushing off to different meetings. We're relaxing. We're having pancakes. We're in our pajamas. I mean, they really started to have this sense of my family. How did I miss this? How did I not prioritize this? I thought I was prioritizing my family by making sure they were all at church, so they'll all be in the celestial kingdom with me. But I wasn't, I was missing it. And COVID helped you see pajamas, pancakes, family bonding. That's what you give an F about.
Right. I do this exercise a lot, like even giving the strongest argument in favor of the church that, like, okay, let's say all the things you recommend do, bring families closer together. Are there other ways to do that same goal, though, other than go to your building and do the things you say? Like, there's other ways to bond as a family that's not through your, top-down structure. But anyway, we're kind of getting a little off topic, but my next slide
This topic brings up so
probably-
many other topics.
It does, because we are caring about what
Yeah.
brings meaning to your life. And
Yes.
our former organization had a monopoly of what gave you meaning. They told you what gave you meaning and purpose in your life. They gave it to you. But my next slide is perhaps my favorite, because I'm just a junkie for the explanation of our psychology. And this next clip kind of explains why we're so prone to give out our F's so easily and haphazardly.
Suffering has a certain evolutionary usefulness to it. Like, if you think about evolution over the course of hundreds of thousands of years, a creature that is happy all the time, that creature is not going to survive. It's actually the creature that is a little bit dissatisfied all the time, a little bit anxious all the time, a little bit paranoid, a little bit pissed off at the people around them. Like, that's the creature that's going to do the most work to actually survive and replicate. I think this modern idea that we shouldn't have to feel bad ever is completely misguided. Not only is it misguided, but it goes against our evolutionary nature, our genetic nature. Negative emotions have an inherent purpose to them, and they help us. And so a lot of this chapter is describing how a lot of the anxiety that we wish to escape from, or the anger we wish to overcome, these emotions are actually signals within our body to do something. They are important signals, and if we ignore them, or if we train ourselves to ignore them, then we are actually limiting ourselves in a lot of ways.
Yeah, so it goes back to this idea of embracing negativity, all those negative emotions, like why are you feeling contentious? Like, understand what's going on. Don't just suppress it. I think it short circuits a lot of opportunities for growth and self-understanding and self-enlightenment. But yeah, my favorite idea was this idea that, like, well, let's go back to our caveman ancestors. Why are we this way? Because if we were more happy naturally, we probably wouldn't have given an F about, gathering enough resources all the time to get better and better. And those people that didn't do that died off. So we just kind of inherited this neuroticism of our ancestors because it was evolutionarily useful for that time.
And you see that in animals. You approach a wild animal and they're skittish and they're jumpy and they're why? Because they know that until they figure out if you're safe or not, that's their nature, is to be afraid of you and to be skittish, and that's the way we need to be. There should be a level of fear, a level of distrust, a level of that's how we survive. It's when you trust completely that you get taken advantage of completely.
Well, there's that example, of course, of our ancestors and the rustling in the bushes, right? The ones that survived were the ones that were wary of the rustling in the bushes and immediately thought, okay, danger. The ones that thought, I'm sure it's just fine, are the ones that aren't here anymore. So we do have that little sense where you should be cautionary. However, I think things like organized religion or high demand, high control, you're just kind of lulled into this state where you are just sort of, I don't know, kind of like
when you're told you can trust us completely,
yeah,
and you're told that your whole life, and you then let down that, and that's what we all did. We let down. Oh, he said that, and I can completely trust him. I've been taught my whole life that I can
Once
completely.
the prophet speaks, the debate's over.
That's right. That's right. And then when you all of a sudden realize, oh my gosh, they've been lying to me the whole time. That's when, then you all of a sudden learn, wow, I'm not trusting another person again without
or another religion
and without information. Yeah. Or institutions.
Yeah.
I question all of them now.
Yes.
I've gone from being too positive that, oh, he'll never do anything to me, to being very, negative and saying, I don't know if I can trust that or not.
Yeah, I loved our discussion with what's his name, the head of the Skeptic Society. I resonated on all levels with that.
Yeah, Michael Shermer, he's awesome.
Shermer, yeah, that's who it was.
Yeah,
I
he's
love
great.
that so much, so good. But yeah, that gets right into our next point about, like, think of it from an evolutionary perspective again. Like, you have someone saying, like, look at this chaotic, dark, unknowable world, and if you just do what I say, everything will go good for you. You can trust me on everything. Like, that is easy. That is appealing. It's like, oh, I don't have to answer all these questions. I just do what he says, and I don't have to worry about all these other questions. But on page 32, he says this. People deny and blame others for their problems for the simple reason that it's easy and feels good, while solving problems, I would add like on your own without someone telling you all the easy answers to just copy and paste, is hard and often feels bad. Forms of blame and denial give us a quick high. There are ways to temporarily escape our problems, and that escape can provide us a quick rush that makes us feel better. Highs come in many forms, like alcohol, moral righteousness that comes from blaming others, or the thrill of some new risky adventure. Highs are shallow and unproductive ways to go about one's life. Much of the self-help world is predicated on peddling these highs to people rather than actually solving their legitimate underlying problems. Many self-help gurus teach you new forms of denial and pump you up with exercises that feel good in the short term while ignoring the underlying issue. Remember, nobody who is actually happy needs to stand in front of a mirror and tell himself that he's happy. Highs also generate addiction. The more you rely on them to feel better about your underlying problems, the more you will seek them out. In this sense, almost anything can become addictive, depending on the motivation behind using it. We all have our chosen methods to numb the pain of our problems, and in moderate doses, there's nothing wrong with this, but the longer we avoid and the longer we numb, the more painful it will be when we finally do confront our issues. Oh, that's heavy.
That is heavy.
Yes, absolutely. That is true that I think often we try to make ourselves high. We try to make ourselves feel good. We certainly did that in the church. We always had to tell everyone, oh, I'm so happy. It's just like standing in front of the mirror. Oh, the gospel makes me happy. You know, if someone asks you, why does it make you happy? Because it makes me happy.
Right. Yes.
And you just knew what to say. But if you really are happy, you're out selling it. You're out telling people. And that's the difference I learned is, you know, I went on a mission and I was not excited about proclaiming the gospel. I felt weird being in a white shirt and a black tie, going around the neighborhoods and knocking on people's doors. I never had this desire to just shout, this is right. But boy, when I learned it was wrong, then I'm
You
like,
started a podcast.
I started a podcast. I started going, wait a minute, people need to know, because now this is something that I say, oh my gosh, people are being hurt by this. People are giving their money to this. I need to say something about this. That's what I need to do. I never felt that way about the gospel and giving it. And now I realize why, because there was always this in the back of my mind, this something that doesn't feel right here. But I didn't let it.
Yeah, so I made a list of all the ways that like the church told me to solve problems. Pray more, go to church, go to the temple, seek the Spirit. And those just kind of, they kick the can further and further. They never actually I still haven't gotten an answer of this question to the people I've asked in the last 2 years. Like, what does it actually look like? Like, really, so you can confirm that you've used the atonement in your life. You know? Like, there's all these things that we say are so helpful, but if you look at this quote, I think they're just numbing denialism.
Yeah.
It's purposely vague. It's absolutely purposely vague. I remember a woman in my ward a long time ago bearing her testimony. She said, it was amazing. She said at a testimony meeting, but she goes, I know my husband, he likes to keep going to the temple because he's trying to, solve problems and work through things, but he would come home more and more depressed every time he went. And I finally told him he couldn't go anymore, and I thought that's extraordinarily honest, because yes, it's almost like the temple is an addictive BandAid that you just go there and you feel a high for a minute, exactly like this just said. But then when you leave, the problem is still there. Did you get an answer, a confirmation? I don't know. Did your brain tell you to do something? I don't know. I think the other part that's interesting is the first sentence there, the first two sentences, to blame others. How many faithful people blame Satan or the adversary for everything that happens? It's out there all the time. I'm told you, I'm on faithful social media all the time. And it's always the adversary did this or because of the adversary. How do you learn to solve that problem? It's not your problem. You've kicked the can down the street to the adversary and it's out of your control. So you never learn from solving it. It's just something that happened. If you pray more, maybe, God will fight the adversary for you and then your problem goes away. But those aren't real world problem solving skills at all. And you don't feel good about it or like you've learned anything.
No, it doesn't really equip you to be better, skillful, and able in your life. It's just a Band-Aid. It's just a distraction. On page 84, he says, and again, let's make the strongest possible argument for the church. Do people often, not in the example necessarily you gave, but in general, do many people report feeling better and uplifted after going to the temple? I think the answer is yes. But on page 84, if they're doing that to just escape and feel that, it's not helping them at all. It's just a temporary Band-Aid. This is what he says. Page 84. Negative emotions are a necessary component to your emotional health. To deny negativity is to perpetuate your problems rather than solve them. We can't just rely on these temporary fixes and highs. We have to actually, like my website and YouTube channel, learn how to be empowered and be better equipped to, do things in our life and solve things.
I think that you're taught kind of in the church that is the way to solve it and handle it. I have an example from way in the past where it was a family get together and there was an altercation. It actually became physical between two family members that were fighting. And this was happening upstairs. There were various aunts, uncles, different parts of the family there. And there was one family where, they were seen sort of as I don't know, the elder statesman of the family kind of, so if anybody was going to be able to solve this altercation and make it peaceful again, it would have been, this particular family member. He was kind of the patriarchal member of the family. He would have had some authority. And we were all looking around for him and his other family members. Where's that family? Where are they? They should help with this because it was kind of getting out of control. And we finally found them and he had taken his family into a whole nother part of the house and they were just praying with the door shut in the bedroom. While the rest of us were out dealing, with these teenagers, the things that had started to happen and we needed to calm everybody down. But their answer was prayer was mightier than getting in and trying to do something. And it was really, it was kind of a wake-up call to me. I thought, gosh, I would have expected him to be the one that really stepped in and said, hey, restore the peace, but he didn't. He went and he completely shut himself away from the situation and he just prayed. It was really eye-opening to me as far as how people handle very difficult dynamics and things.
I think when people go to the temple, they often go there if they go there for a problem, and they're not going there to solve it. They're going there to turn it over to the Lord to solve.
Yeah.
And when you do that, all you're doing is turning it over to chance to solve it. But you walk away saying, I turned that over to the Lord. It's not my problem anymore. He's going to work on it. Therefore, I felt better because I turned it over to him. And really what you did is you just stopped giving an F about it. You said, okay, it's out of my control. Let the Lord do it. So I don't have to give an F about it anymore because it's now I've turned it over to him. That's really not going to solve the problem. You've just turned it over to chance as to whether it gets solved or not.
Right. And I can't remember how deeply I go into this issue. I think in the book club, I just briefly mentioned it, but he has a whole good half of a chapter about this idea of again, regardless of where the problem came from, even if it's not your fault, he says you need to differentiate between blame and responsibility. It's so easy to say, oh, this problem came from Satan, but that doesn't help anything. Wherever it came from, he says, you need to take responsibility for anything in your court with it now. Wherever it came from, it's on your plate now. And he kind of reverses the Spider-Man thing with great power comes great responsibility. He promises that once you start to take more responsibility for the things going on in your life, you will get great power. With great responsibility comes great power. I forget what page he said that on, but that's a big principle that I liked from the book. Okay, so just again, more ways that people live in denial and are entitled and stuff.
Form number one is, I'm awesome and the rest of you all suck, therefore I deserve to have special treatment. Form number two is, I suck and the rest of you are awesome, so I deserve special treatment. So in the psychological research, this is known as grandiose narcissism versus victim narcissism. And it's basically, they seem to be opposites on the surface. Like one person thinks he's better than everybody, and then the other person thinks he's worse than everybody. But the behavior ends up being the same because both people have delusional beliefs about their place in the status hierarchy. One person thinks he's at the top, one person thinks he's at the bottom. But the behavior ends up being the same. They end up being completely self-absorbed. They think everything in the world should be altered and catered to them. And yeah, they just become unbearable to be around.
Because they're not taking any responsibility. They're like, oh, I'm a victim, or oh, I shouldn't have to deal with this because I'm so great. It's all y'all's problem, clearly. Just extreme denial, and it doesn't help anyone. So take responsibility for your problems.
We were out last night with Dr. John, and he showed me a video of a comedian, and it was really quite hilarious because she said, you know what the hardest part about being a Christian is? Being better than everybody else. Then she starts going off and listing the orders of sin and stuff, and how Christians, it's funny, but just that point that, yeah, it's really hard to be a Christian because you're better than everyone else, and you have to you have to show everyone else that you're better than them. So it's kind of funny to watch, and that's clearly the way LDS. Oh, I have the true gospel, therefore I don't have the problems you have because I follow Christ.
I'm temple worthy and you're not, so clearly you're to blame because God favors me. I literally, I mean, not word for word, what was basically told that recently.
Absolutely.
Okay, so the answer to this problem, I really like this. I actually did encounter in my research on this topic about a decade ago in a wonderful book called Difficult Conversations by Patton, Heen, and Stone. But this is what he says about it. So again, the solution to denialism is to complexify your identity. You're not always all good. You're not always a victim. You are a mix. That's normal. That's okay. We all have highs and lows. We all have weaknesses. We all make mistakes. A person who actually has a high self-worth is able to look at the negative parts of their character frankly and say, yes, sometimes I am irresponsible with money. Yes, sometimes I do exaggerate my own successes. Yes, I rely too much on others to support me and should be more self-reliant. And then they act to improve upon these things. But entitled people, because they are incapable of acknowledging their problems openly and honestly, are incapable of improving their lives in any lasting or meaningful way. They're left chasing high after high and accumulate greater and greater levels of denial. But eventually, reality must hit, and the underlying problems will once again make themselves clear. It's just a question of when and how painful it will be. Someone asked me 3 days ago what it would take for the church to regain my respect. And I told them, look, they do a lot of things that I think are good and I respect those things. But if they want to gain it on a grand scale, they would tomorrow take responsibility for absolutely everything they've ever lied about, concealed, misrepresented, etc. I would respect them a lot more if they did that. But, they're just kind of kicking the can further and further down the road, and their reckoning is just going to be worse.
Yeah, the statement, that the church does not apologize, and the statement that you don't criticize leaders even if they're wrong, that falls right into this statement. And then but entitled people, because they are incapable of acknowledging their own problems openly and honestly, are incapable of improving their lives. And I would say that the church is incapable of improving lives because they will not acknowledge the problems. And that's why so many people are leaving the church, is because they will not openly and honestly acknowledge the problems and take responsibility for them and improve upon them.
Yes, and Landon, you touched on the moment I became confident in my decision to leave. I was one of those people that was like, oh my gosh, am I condemning myself? Like, even if the prophets are bad and they've done all this stuff that I don't agree with, like, what if it's still true? I just lived with all this anxiety about it. But that thing that you mentioned is when I knew I was making the right decision, because when I would ask sincere questions that I think deserve a good answer, I would be given time and time again what I now know to be thought-stopping cliches. They wouldn't give me an answer. They would give me this ephemeral word salad that meant nothing. And I just knew that, like, if this was true, they would have good answers for this. It would be able to hold up to scrutiny. They wouldn't have to say things like, oh, you know, God's ways are mysterious, or even the very elect will be deceived. Like, these non-answers that didn't satisfy me one whit. They didn't even get at the question. They would just change the subject.
I just wrote down thought-stopping cliches. I like that. That pretty much
Stephen
describes
Hassan,
every answer. Yep.
Yeah, Stephen Hassan has a whole list. His website, Freedom of Mind, it was instrumental in getting me to reclaim my agency.
Beautiful.
Okay, so now we get into the really good stuff of the book. This next clip is the key to happiness. Are you ready for this?
I'm ready.
We're ready. Everybody, get
Everyone
your
can use
notepads
this.
out.
Yeah.
Happiness comes from solving problems. If you either pretend you have no problems in your life to solve, then you won't be happy. But if you also have problems in your life that you feel you can't solve, then you won't be happy. So kind of the secret sauce is finding problems that you kind of want to have or kind of enjoy having. And that's how I wrap up the chapter with a section called Choose Your Struggle. And I'll actually read the first couple paragraphs of that section because it's one of the most important sections of the book, and it's resonated with a lot of people. So if I ask you, what do you want out of your life? And you say something like, I want to be happy and have a great family and a job I like, your response is so common and expected that it doesn't mean anything. Everybody enjoys what feels good. Everybody wants to live a carefree, happy, and easy life, to fall in love and have amazing sex and relationships, to look perfect and make lots of money and be popular and well-respected and admired. Everybody wants that. It's easy to want that. A more interesting question, a question that most people never consider, is what pain do I want in my life? What am I willing to struggle for? Because that actually seems to be a greater determinant of how our lives turn out.
Isn't that, like, obvious but also counterintuitive? Like,
Yeah.
really, to get all those things, amazing relationships, a good career, you have to pay the price of pain for the work it takes to get those things. But in the literature of self-help, like, that's kind of like missed. It's like, oh, we read these new books that come out every year because we want to get what we want without paying the price, without the pain, without the struggle.
That's kind of counter Buddhist. The Buddhist is all about how do you stop suffering. But this question is, how do you make the suffering in your life suffering you want to suffer as opposed to suffering you don't want to suffer?
Yeah, I had a really influential 8th grade teacher, and he's the one that started me doing my quote journal. I think I mentioned in the last one, I had 3,500 pages of general authority quotes. I was always collecting quotes. It was my 8th grade teacher that started me on this. And one of the first quotes I wrote down in my then non-religious quote journal was by Margaret Thatcher. And she said, look at a day where you're supremely satisfied at the end of that day. It's not a day where you lazed about doing nothing. It's a day where you had everything to do and you did it.
And that is so true.
That is so true. Like the days where we tape 4 podcasts in a row, Landon, although we say, what the hell did we do to ourselves? We're like, you know what? We did that. We talked to some really awesome people. We had some great content. I think it'll make a difference for people. And I feel good, exhausted, but good, right?
Exactly. Like there's this book by Chris Guillebeau, and it's entitled The Happiness of Pursuit. Like it really is. You can think of happiness like, what are the problems that are most meaningful to me? And I want to work and apply myself to those hard questions, those specific types of problems, because that's what your life is. It's a never-ending series of problems. But when you learn to choose to value better things, then you get better problems and therefore a better life. I just love that, once I read this, I had to read it twice, but that clicked for me finally. Like, oh, I get the relationship between everything now. It's your values are what you give an F about. And once you give an F about in things that you care about, the problems you're solving on a daily basis give you meaning and you have a happy life. Oh, it makes sense.
I look at, when was our country probably, in the most proud state, where you were so proud of your country and what you did. And it was probably during the 60s and the moon landing program, when Kennedy said, I propose that we send a man to the moon in the next 10 years. And the entire country went to work on solving that problem. And there were a lot of defeats, the capsule and the crew. I think it was number one that burned up, and they lost the crew, but they kept going. They kept pushing. They kept struggling, even when it looked like the rocket would blow up. They kept going and they did it. And when they did it, there was just such a sense of pride in the country for the accomplishment. And it pulled everybody together to solve that problem. And so I think that, that is exactly right. That's when you feel it. And sometimes in the church, that's how they're able to do things, is they create a problem that needs solved. Unfortunately, it's, we need to have 200 temples by the year, and they'll do it. And that's one reason that people will say they're happy in the church, is because they give them a problem to solve. And that lets you, have some source of reason for living, I guess.
Yeah, but think about that in terms of temple building. I'm wearing my shirt again. They've told a lot of the members in these cities where there's controversy over the temple building, you're being persecuted. Your religious freedom is being attacked. You've got to ban. And you're right. There's this sense of camaraderie as they're trying to fight. And they call the residents in the towns the adversary and things like that. They're united in a problem against a common enemy, but that's very artificial. That's not real, but they've been told that that's what they give an F about. And that's their problem. When the year before, they didn't know anything about the temple. They didn't care anything about their neighbors. Everything was fine. But now they've got to give the ultimate F about this, right? And kind of throw their neighbor under the bus.
Yeah, that segues perfectly into the next section. Like, we've literally been given, a form of like the secret to happiness here. But then, just like you demonstrated, like, if you give all this authority and power to someone and you follow what they say and you trust them implicitly on everything, then all of a sudden that can change so quickly because you're so certain that you can trust that and you don't examine your values in and of themselves. And so after he gives these keys, he goes into, but wait, there's another problem I have to go over. We have to solve this. So problem number 3, to me, when I read the book, was the problem of certainty. Certainty is the companion of delusion.
And then I talk about the dangers of certainty. And this is one of the more fun sections of the book. I actually had a cyber stalker for a number of years. She was nonviolent, thank God. What was remarkable about her was that she had this unbelievable certainty, like absolutely unshakable certainty, in completely batshit crazy beliefs. I mean, she literally told me to my face that angels told her that we were supposed to be together, that God said that our relationship was going to cure death. These were things that she said to me. And whenever I tried to kind of poke holes in them or point out that maybe that didn't make a lot of sense, it had absolutely no effect. She met my wife, no effect, didn't change her mind at all. To me, it was fascinating in that maybe one of the most troubled people I've ever known in my life was also probably the most certain and unshakable person I've ever met in my life. And so I use her as an example of the binds that certainty can get us into. And then I use a number of examples, from my own life and from other people's lives, and then I kind of trot out the benefits of uncertainty. It opens up space for you to learn and improve. It helps guard you against like extremist ideology or just becoming like a crazy zealot for some cause. It opens room for dialogue with people, to learn from other people, to make other people feel more heard, which improves relationships. I've got a section in here that I call Manson's Law of Avoidance, which I decided to be cheeky and name a law after myself. But Manson's Law of Avoidance says that the more something threatens your identity, the more you will avoid it. And I bring this up in terms of what are the pieces of information that we protect ourselves from? Because ultimately, like grasping onto some sense of certainty, it's a means of protecting our ego from perceived threats. And so Manson's Law basically says that like the more threatening something is, the more we will become certain in things that will help us avoid dealing with that truth.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah. He nailed Mormonism right there.
Right there. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. They're so certain. And so because of that, they can justify all manner of things, breaking the codes of the town or, doing things in their history because God told them. I mean, it's endless. But
it's Nephi and Laban right there. That's the story.
Exactly.
You've got to do it.
Yeah. And if you're sure that God told you, then I mean, what other choice do you have? Choice is kind of taken away from the equation along with critical thinking. It's a very pernicious, but very like quick high phenomena. I mean, like that's one of the things that like after leaving my belief system before leaving the church, I missed being so certain, so absolutely sure that I was right and everyone was wrong. Like it makes me seem egotistical, and it was, and I was, but I really liked being like, yep, this is true. We've got all the answers. Like I loved that feeling. It gave me a high.
That's very dangerous. And there's a reason I think they cultivate certainty in the church from when you're a small child. I know, I don't believe, I'm not trying to find out. You say, I know from the very beginning. So, and I don't know what that feels like, because I mean, if you're familiar with my story, I've always been kind of agnostic since I was a kid. It never made sense to me. And I was never certain. I was always questioning ever. So I don't know, Landon, do you consider yourself a certain person? What does that feel like? And then as you lose certainty, what does that feel like?
I actually just wrote something down that came to my mind.
We're taking notes on this. Well, we're podcasting and taking notes.
Good. Well, I have a master's degree in teaching. This is my life
seriously,
mission.
this is a
I was going to do
master
it
course.
as an institute teacher, but I love this stuff. Thank you. That is the highest compliment, is when someone is enlightened by my teaching. Thank you.
No. What was your note, Landon?
I just wrote down, certainty is the enemy of sanity.
There you go.
You're not really saying if you think that you know everything and that you're right about everything. That's just a recipe for disaster. The more that you understand, I don't know everything, the more sane you really are, and the more able you are to deal with problems, because you're able to say, I'm not sure. I better get more information. I better talk to other people and find out other points of view. I've got to really weigh this. And then you can make the the correct decision. But if you're certain that you already have the right decision about things, that's just the, leads to insanity. Because
not only does it lead to insanity, but it's an insult. It is a threat to your very being if someone else disagrees with you. You have to correct them. You have to set them on the straight path, because obviously they are wrong. And the right thing to do is to force them to your way of thinking. I mean, certainty is just so pernicious. I am going to court with my ex-wife right now because she is certain that our divorce decree means this one thing at this one part. And I'm like, look, that could mean any number of things. Let's try to, find a solution that works for both of us. She won't even listen. She's already knows for sure that she's right.
Yeah. And the more you tell yourself you're right. You can't get out of that. I mean, your brain's like, this is a fact. This is what happens. I mean, there are studies where people will say something that they think might have happened. The more times they repeat it, it becomes a certain fact in their head. Even when you can prove to them, look, this is on tape. This didn't happen to you. Maybe I'm talking about one scenario with one certain person, but they believe it because they've told themselves so many times, or rehearsed the story that way so many times that they absolutely believe it. So there's a book called The Sin of Certainty. Certainty is a big thing. It is. And unfortunately, that's kind of one of the criteria to be in the church. You've got to be certain. And don't we, Landon, in our chat, have all kinds of very well-meaning, faithful LDS people that come onto our podcast, and I think they get really uncomfortable and they start fighting with people in the chat because they've got to tell them what they know. It takes an awful lot of nerve to do. I mean, I mean nerve, like to be brave to do that, to come onto a more post or nuanced where people have a certain point of view and life experience, and to basically bury your testimony in the chat. But we have those kinds of people all the time. Some are a little more belligerent. Others, you can just tell they're sincere. They just say, well, I disagree. I know that it's right, and you're like, oh gosh, certainty is a bitch.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the next book.
And going back to the book I mentioned, Difficult Conversations, they actually posit that one of the reasons why conversations are so hard is because every time you're having a conversation, there's kind of this thing in the background of like anything that is said or a position that is taken could threaten me personally because I define myself by these principles. So you have to agree with me. Otherwise, you make me uncomfortable. I have to defend my principles or my belief system. And again, we've already given the solution to that. We need to complexify our identity, like define yourself more loosely. Like sometimes you are wrong. Sometimes I think of myself as one way when I'm not. Like it's okay. We all are imperfect. Like just tone it down, become a little bit closer to the ground, and then these things won't happen. But I'm here to tell you, in this media saturated environment, we are conditioned to be like, okay, here's a soundbite. Now react. We love to react quickly on a dime. And I think it's one of the most destructive things in modern society. Wow. Okay. And on that note, the psychologist Roy Baumeister began researching the concept of evil. Basically, he looked for people who do bad things and why they do that. At the time, it was assumed that people did bad things because they felt horrible about themselves. They had low self-esteem. In fact, it was usually the opposite. Some of the worst criminals felt pretty damn good about themselves. And it was this feeling good in spite of reality around them that gave them the justification for hurting and disrespecting others. For individuals to feel justified in doing horrible things to people, they must feel an unwavering certainty in their own righteousness, in their beliefs, in their deservedness. Hashtag true church, hashtag true people. Racists do racist things because they're certain about their genetic superiority. Religious fanatics blow themselves up and murder dozens of people because they're certain of their place in heaven as martyrs. Men rape and abuse women out of certainty that they're entitled to their bodies. Evil people don't believe they're evil. Rather, they think, and I would say convince themselves, that everyone else is evil.
Wow, that's a very powerful way to look at things.
Yeah. So again, he's just talking about how certainty is, you distrust it.
Yeah, we see that all the time, whenever there's a war, you have to make the enemy subhuman. And, because if you say, oh, they're just watching out for their kids like us, nobody wants to fight. But you have to make them
demonize.
Yeah, demonize and less human and make you better. We're the better. Our cause is greater than their cause, and therefore this is justified. And you see that all over the place. Your family shuns you because you aren't as righteous as they are. You're not living to the standards that they expect, and you might somehow influence the other members of the family to do the same thing, because, you know, they see what you're doing, and there can't be room for anything other than that certainty of you have the gospel, and that is the only way to live.
Yeah, shaking faith. But we're just coming off of the Nemo disciplinary council, and that's what they said. He was shaking the faith of some of the people that he was, you know, writing letters and questions to, things like that. And that's grounds for being completely set apart from the church, excommunicated. So, and I'm sure that the people that are leading the court feel completely certain that they are doing the right thing, completely certain that Nemo is a villain, and they've got to do it, and they feel just fine about it, you know. But if you looked at it in a different way, and I actually feel that's why they used to have all the high counselors and the, you know, the state presidency there. They don't do that anymore, because you get would that be 17, 18, whatever men in a room hearing something. There's going to be a few that aren't so certain. They're going to go, you know what, Nemo, I don't know. He just seems like he's a kid asking questions. You know, you're going to have some people that aren't going to have that certainty. So you got to lock that in. But yeah, certainty is a scourge on the earth. Let's say that.
Right. And even the words they use to describe that, like it used to be excommunication. Now
Yeah.
it's like what, a council of love
Yeah.
or something?
Oh, that's
Yeah.
terrible. Yeah.
And what you just said of like, you know, leading others astray with their faith, you know, like asking questions, like you can label those actions any number of ways, but you chose those words because you're already assuming the rightness of your description. It's mind-bogglingly unhealthy. You should be tentative and be like, you know, we think this, but we're open to new facts, you know, like now I'm getting on a personal hobby horse tangent, but just please, people, be teachable. That is like one of the greatest goods, is to be teachable. Be like, you know, from what we've seen, we think this about you, Nemo, but tell us, we would really like to be wrong. Enlighten us, teach it. You know, like
Yeah.
that would just,
I'm sure that was not the conversation. I'm sure that had nothing to do with the conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, in the church, when you get new facts, you don't change your certainty, you change your interpretation of the facts.
Yes.
You just interpret them different to come to the same conclusion.
Yeah,
And
and they avoid where that logic leads, which is why we need thought-stopping cliches, so we never get to the end of that logic.
Right.
And I forget what page of the book this is on, but he says, the more uncomfortable the answer, the more likely it is to be true. That's what Manson says.
Wow.
Wow.
Okay. So again, define yourself loosely is one of the solutions to all this problem of certainty.
An extension of Manson's law of avoidance is that we should define ourselves as loosely and ambiguously as possible, because the less defined our self is, the less we need to cling to defense mechanisms or faulty ideas to protect ourselves. This is fundamentally a Buddhist idea, the idea of no self. You know, if there is no such thing as self, then there's nothing to protect, and there's nothing that you need to be certain about in the first place. Finally, I finish up the chapter with a few questions to help you become more uncertain in your life. Question number 1 is, what if I'm wrong? Question number 2 is, what would it mean if I were wrong? Question number 3 is, would being wrong create a better or worse problem than my current problem, both for myself and others? And that's chapter 6.
All right, I have tons of quotes here, but I think we've covered this ground enough. I'm going to move on unless you have like a really burning comment.
Nope, it's just a great way to think about yourself and look at yourself, and just to be open in all aspects of your life like that.
Yeah, and just remember, to the people who are certain, just keep in the back of your mind kind of what we talked about last time. They're getting benefits from their certainty. Like, try to have a little grace and patience with them.
Right.
Don't just condemn them. Like, they're getting a lot of benefits from being like, oh, I'm right, I'm good, I have so much self-esteem. You know, just keep that at the back of your mind. Okay, but he says if you actually want to solve your problems and make your life better in a meaningful way in reality, he says on page 83, it's far more helpful to just right off the bat assume that you're ignorant and you don't know a whole lot. This keeps you unattached to superstitious or poorly informed beliefs. I mean, think about how often you would revise your positions if you were so if you allowed your beliefs to be changed with that level of ease. I mean, all those poor beliefs that didn't work, rather than, staking in your heels, I mean, would get changed to better beliefs. And promotes a constant state of learning and growth. So again, just be teachable, realize you don't know everything, and just hear a different perspective. Don't be like, oh, that's different than what I believe. Now I feel defensive and I got to attack you back. Just try it on. Just the mark of an enlightened mind, according to Aristotle, is the ability to hold on to a thought and not need to judge it.
Yeah, wise words.
Yes. Okay, so we're almost getting to the end here, and here's like a big solution. We already touched on it earlier about our values. Everything comes down to our values. Now he's going to give us what he thinks are good values, bad values, and why.
Good values tend to be 1, reality-based, 2, socially constructive, and 3, immediate and controllable. Bad values tend to be 1, superstitious, 2, socially destructive, and 3, not immediate or controllable. I go on to say honesty is a good value because it's something you can have complete control over, it reflects reality, and it benefits others.
All right, and then again, he kind of gave this same framework that I mentioned briefly earlier of just to revise those things. Here's these layers. Layer 1 is just try to understand what's going on with you. What is what I'm feeling? Define it, describe it. I'm angry. Layer 2, ask yourself, why do I feel that? Why am I angry? What is this doing for me? What am I reacting to? And then this is the most important layer. This is the layer that, in my personal opinion, people spend the least amount of time on, and they need to spend the most amount of time on. There's a quote in an earlier slide that kind of goes into why that is. Like, we all need therapists is basically what he says. But layer 3 is our personal values, why we care. I'm angry because I constantly feel as though I'm disrespected. Am I, though? Going back to the Stoics, being like, do I have an entitlement to be respected all the time by everyone? Or should I change that expectation to, this is normal. I expected this. Not everyone is going to respect me all the time. And just like observe yourself under that new belief rather than the old belief. Like this 3 steps is, again, so simple, but so transcendently profound if you really apply it, I think. All right. And then again, just another clip about like you're always choosing your struggles, and that's the solution to
the big kind of epiphany of this chapter is that you are always choosing, whether you realize it or not. There's no such thing as a situation where you are not choosing your struggle or not choosing your problem. The only thing that changes is whether you admit it to yourself or not. People don't like hearing this point. They don't like hearing the idea that every problem in their life, they chose it. And the second section of this chapter, the reason why is I point out that we tend to conflate responsibility and fault. We assume that if you are responsible for something, it means that it's your fault. But these are 2 completely different things. You know, it's like if I get cancer, it's not my fault that I got cancer, but it is absolutely my responsibility to deal with the cancer. You know, if somebody leaves a newborn baby on my doorstep, that's not my fault that somebody left it there, but it is absolutely my responsibility. I have to do something about it. And every moment of life is this way. Even if the mob boss kidnaps your family, makes you run a marathon, you are choosing to run the marathon. You are choosing for the lives of the people you care about to be more important than the pain of the marathon. The thing you are choosing from moment to moment is how to value each experience. So even if I, like, let's say I go to a baseball game and I'm bored to tears, I'm choosing to be bored. Why? Because I'm choosing not to be interested in the baseball game. Sure, I could sit there and blame the baseball game like, oh, you're so fucking boring. Why don't you entertain me more? Well, why don't I change my definition of entertainment? Why don't I change what I find interesting? Why don't I develop the ability to pay more attention or appreciate the subtleties of throwing a curveball or something? In each experience in life, there is a component of choice embedded in it. And we tend not to be aware of that choice, but as soon as we become aware of it, 2 things happen. 1, we become way more comfortable with pain, and 2, we actually get off our ass and fucking do something. Because now we don't care whose fault it is anymore. We don't care if it's boring or tedious or unfair. You fucking do something. You realize in every moment you have a choice to do something or not do something, to blame somebody else or take responsibility yourself. And once you develop that habit or that value of constant responsibility, everything fucking changes.
Yeah, if he has one obsession, one principle that he like cares about the most, it's about taking responsibility for yourself and what happens to you. I don't know how extreme I agree with him, but I think it's a very empowering idea to be like, you know, even if I am going through something, I can choose what part of that something to focus on. Or like I read several years back a book, I think it was by Jonathan Haidt, and he mentions like, you know, if you're upset at something like losing a board game, just change your goal. Like instead of winning the board game, have your goal be like, oh, I'm going to help this person win, or I'm just going to try to get the yellows, you know, just like whatever your focus is, whatever your goal is, that's how you can change your mood and happiness in any given situation. Again, a small idea, but to me, it's really powerful if you really adopt this lens of like, I can choose at any moment.
Yeah. Control your expectations. That is a huge part of it, right?
Yep. All right. And then the next clip is about embracing rejection. Again, just in the overall theme of the book about not avoiding negativity. If you can get past this, a lot of things will open up to you.
Rejection makes your life better, which on a more philosophical note, if you think about this project of choosing what you value, in order to value one thing, you have to reject the other things. You know, it's like if I want to value my career over all else, I need to be able to sacrifice other things. That means I need to be able to reject other things. That means I need to reject my dream of becoming a pro gamer, or reject the idea that I'm going to become a software engineer, or reject the idea that I'm going to go live on a beach somewhere. If I choose one value to prioritize over everything else, that means by definition, I must be willing to reject other things. If I'm not willing to reject those things, then I'm not able to actually prioritize what's important in my life. And so this is why people who struggle to say no, they often feel very lost and they don't know what they want from themselves.
Yeah, like going back to, you know, why I would always say yes, it's because I feared that people wouldn't like me if I said no. But now my belief is people who really care about me will accept my no's. They will still be with me. And if they leave when I say no, well, they were never really with me to begin with.
Rebecca's muted.
I'm pulling an RFM. It's hard to get to that point though. You know, you have to really learn to do that because it's so ingrained in us to care and to people please. And it's hard to just be you, you know.
I learned it early.
It is vulnerable.
Yeah.
I learned it early in my dating life. So
To accept no.
to embrace rejection.
To embrace rejection.
Very nice. Well, here's what he says on
not
page...
meant to be.
That's right.
Yeah. Here's what he says on page 119. Here's something weird but true. We don't actually know what a positive or negative experience is. Some of the most difficult and stressful moments of our lives also end up being the most formative and motivating. Some of the best and most gratifying experiences of our lives also end up being the most distracting and demotivating. Don't trust your conception of positive, negative experiences. All that we know for certain is what hurts in the moment and what doesn't. And you know what? That's not worth that much. I really like that. It comes straight from Buddhism. Again, it's kind of a repackaging of Stoicism and Buddhism, in my opinion. Okay, another recommendation he gives is to commit hard to things. Commitment brings added features and benefits to your life.
There's kind of a hidden freedom of commitment, of finding that one thing or one or two things in your life that are more important than anything else and committing full-heartedly to them. On the surface, it sounds limiting, and I think a lot of people, particularly in my generation, we avoid those sorts of commitments. You know, it's like, I want to go everywhere. I want to do all the things. I want to date all the people. It's like this constant effort to always keep your options open. But as soon as you limit yourself to a few things in your life that you truly care about, there's a new form of freedom that happens on a very subtle level, which is that I don't have to give a fuck about this stuff. I don't have to give a fuck about who I'm gonna date. I don't have to give a fuck about what my gaming friends think about me. These are the things I care about. These are the ways I'm gonna measure my life. That's what I'm gonna pursue. And there's just this abundance of inner mental freedom to pursue it.
So I remember I was with someone and she like had all these things she wanted to do. She wanted to be successful on Etsy. She wanted to do this Instagram thing. She wanted to like have her bookshelf, like do all this interior stuff. Like she had all these priorities. And I was like, girl, just like write a list of everything that you want to do and put it in order. Do the top 5 things. And she wrote down like, I think it was 22 things. And I was like, okay, what's your top 5? And she could not do it. She was like, they're all important. I want to do it all. And I kid you not, to this day, she has done none of those major goals. Like not a single one. You're muted again, Rebecca.
I was just nodding. Yeah, no,
Oh,
I agree.
okay.
I can be like that sometimes. It's hard, you know, to focus on the one couple things, but I also know people that are way stuck in that where they don't accomplish anything because they're just working on the minutia around it, you know, and they just can't get there. So human nature.
Yep. So it's okay to have other things fall down as long as you're paying attention to the bigger things. It's a hard thing. I struggle with it, but it's a very good principle. And then just kind of a sum of the whole thing, like a lot of people, I think, read this book to get something specific, which is, you know, this ideal person that's like, oh, I don't care what anyone thinks of me. And, you know, I just don't give an F about other people and other things. And like, this is just kind of a summary, again, to go back to the core principles of what he is saying and what he isn't saying.
Harsh truth of the day. The harsh truth of the day is that if you care too much what other people think, it's probably because you don't have something more important to care about. Think about it. Let's do a thought experiment. Let's pretend a baby is trapped in a burning building, and you're the only person that knows that that baby is there. Now all these people are standing around, and you're like, oh my God, I gotta go save that baby. And you start running into the building, and all these people you know are like, man, what's Mark doing? That's fucking crazy. Wow, you're an idiot, Mark. Who runs into a burning building? They start talking all this shit. Would that stop you from going into that building? No, you don't fucking care what people on the street think. There's a fucking kid who's about to die. You go save that fucking life. And when you come out, you also don't care what they think. You either did it or you didn't. You know, if you come out and they're all like, oh my God, Mark, you're such a great guy, woohoo. You know, it's like, what matters is the kid's life. Beyond the social validation, beyond the embarrassment, the approval, people agreeing or disagreeing with you, saving somebody's life is what matters in that moment. Now that's an extreme example, but the same principle plays out throughout life. You will stop caring what other people think about you when you have something more important to care about. When you have something worth being embarrassed over. When you have something worth being ridiculed for. When you believe in something so intensely that it's so important that if you're willing to lose friends or the respect of your neighbors, that's when you stop caring what other people think. And the irony of this, of course, is that that is the moment that everybody starts respecting you.
Boom. There's
Wow.
the gospel according to Mark.
Yeah, that is. And I think about that from a post-Mormon kind of a thing. And you have to add in there willing to lose family, unfortunately, you know, for your convictions, what you believe, how you want to live your life. It's really sad that it's that way, but that's what happens sometimes. Maybe, you know, not forever, but short term, things change a lot, but you have to be willing. So wow, that is powerful.
It is. It's really clear and simple, but wow, really profound, especially when, you know, like me, I'm a struggling people pleaser. I want people to be happy with me all the time, but I can't both be pleasing of what they want and say, hey, you need to respect me. Like I can't do both. I have to say, what am I going to do? And what are the consequences? And I have to accept the consequences. And that's one thing I'm learning. Okay, so a summary, this comes from, I don't know if I've mentioned, I have a specific method that I read books with. It's Mortimer J. Adler's method. He is known for the book, How to Read a Book. And this is my section that in my method, I call just the quick win. So if you remember nothing else from this book, here's some things to just remember. So reject others' priorities and accept suffering. Define yourself as loosely as possible. When you have a rigid, or when you don't have a rigid definition of yourself, you get less defensive just naturally. Identify with the negative aspects of your person. Yes, sometimes I do this. Sometimes I fall short in this. Just all of that is normal and good, and you still love yourself. Regularly contemplate your own mortality. This is actually the whole last chapter, but I summarize it by his quote of Mark Twain. The fear of death follows from the fear of life. A man who lives fully is prepared to die at any time. There's a lot in there, but just again, like, choose today to spend your time on the things you care about, and then death won't have as much power over you. Our struggles determine our successes. Our problems birth our happiness. The more uncomfortable the answer, the more likely it is to be true. We don't always control what happens to us, but we always control how we interpret what happens to us and how we respond. Again, that comes straight from Stoicism. Take radical responsibility for your life. Responsibility is not the same as blame. Self-delusion is counteracted by our willingness to self-reflect and embrace negative truths. And the best relationships come from having healthy boundaries and accepting hard truths. Specifically, this is a hard thing for me, being a recovering people pleaser. He says, healthy boundaries and being comfortable disappointing your partner. He says those are the two things that go hand in hand. And then finally, happiness comes by caring or giving an F about something greater than yourself, like the fire. Like anytime you have something like that, all the other things all of a sudden don't mean as much because you have something bigger driving yourself. And that is my presentation.
Wow, I feel like I want to go climb a mountain. Don't you agree, Landon?
No, I don't want to climb a
No,
mountain.
okay.
I
Metaphorically.
got better things to give an F about.
Yeah.
That's my priority. No, this is just so good. And now Landon and I have kind of gone through it twice, because we were in book club when we had the presentation. Of course, this is a little different because we focused a little more on our journeys as, post-Mormons, a little more heavily. But, I just think there's so much to learn here. It helps you understand yourself, helps you understand others. And that's really important, especially in the position that a lot of us are on, kind of on a faith journey. So what do you think, Landon? What are your final thoughts? Excellent, excellent presentation, Kendel. This was just amazing.
Yeah, I think when we read through this book, there was, several people who said, this is kind of just common sense. And, obviously, it's counterintuitive that, the way that you, if you don't give an F about something, that's not how you succeed. You succeed by giving an F about it. And certainly anyone could, shoot holes through different things, but there was definitely some good points in here and some good life lessons and some different ways to look at life and how to approach it. So for some people, they'll say this works. Other people may say it doesn't work, but it was definitely worth the read to me because it made me consider these things and ponder how does that really affect my life.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you think, Kendel? Having gone
Yeah,
through
I
it
was
now,
really
presented
glad.
it twice.
I submitted the book list. You were asking for
Yeah.
recommendations for the
Yeah.
Good Book Club. I submitted my list like 5 days before the deadline, and this was one of the books that I had on my list for 10 years or however since it's been published, and I'd never gotten to it, and it was chosen. And I was like, okay, I'll present on it.
I'll do it. We were happy because it was our first one after we put the list out. So we're like, oh no, someone has to do this in 3 weeks. But yeah, exactly. There are things that you're like, oh, that makes sense. Everyone knows that, but do they know that? You kind of explore it in a new way, and his thought process is super interesting. So I think it was valuable, and I hope everybody else thought it was valuable. And I think it's interesting. I'm assuming we're having some really fascinating comments in the chat about what we do give an F about and what we don't give an F about. And I think a lot of us are in a unique position because we've had this major shift, most of us, in in everything in our lives as we've stepped away from a high demand, high control. Some of us in it for decades, our entire life. And so you have this whole shakeup, and so we're almost forced to confront some of these things and do some of these things mentioned on this podcast just necessarily because your whole world is rocked. Your whole paradigm has changed. And you have to really reevaluate, what do I give an F about? What am I willing to sacrifice? What boundaries am I willing to set? And yeah, it sounds like our brains are in mush, right? A hot mess, but you can weed through it and come out in a much better place on the other side. Is that kind of how you see it, Landon?
Yeah, absolutely. And, people who are members of the church, who are believing members, can say, well, I agree that this is what I choose to give an F about.
Right.
And,
Yes.
and that's great.
Yep.
If that's
Yep.
what you choose to give an F about, the one thing I'd caution is make sure it's something that you choose to give an F about and not something that someone tells you
That's
have to
it.
give an F about. And so you just accept that.
That is a really good point, because I see so many posts from people saying, oh, I visited my family. All they talk about is church. There is nothing else. There is not one other interest. It's all church. And again, that's great if you decided to do that. And maybe in high demand, high control scenarios, you can't make that decision. But that's very valuable to think about, Landon. So, wow.
Yeah, I
Well,
was shocked how many of my friendships were based on that. And once that changed,
Yes.
it's like, wow, we have nothing in common anymore. And if
I
I were
know,
to say
isn't that
one more
sad?
thing to the people who are in the church agreeing with this, I would just say that's fine too. I agree with
Mhm.
Landon, but just please, for everyone else's sake, whatever you are getting from the church that you believe in so strongly, just be a little tentative. Don't, take extreme positions of like, who was it? Jacob Hansen a few weeks ago said that like the building of temples is the
Yeah.
most poverty reducing use of money ever. Just
Yeah.
like extreme things that destroy your credibility and your sanity, like this problem of certainty that we talked about.
Yep, there's a lot of examples of that. That is for sure. So tell us as we end here, Kendel, where can we find you? We'll put your links in the show notes. Everybody's becoming such a huge fan of you and your content and your teaching style. Tell us what you're doing next, where we can find you, just, some things like that. So people can have more Kendel.
Yeah. Contact me on Twitter, X at Kendel C. I'm gonna start my YouTube channel regularly. If I haven't already, I don't know when this is gonna post, but I've already written several scripts of my YouTube journey. Is gonna just be cataloging just like this, beliefs that I think are superior to what I believed before, and just trying to catalog the most worthwhile ideas and micro skills and concepts that I've ever come across. I've been a lifelong learner, lifelong reader. I've read tons of books, and I mentioned I use the Mortimer J. Adler method to read a book, so I have it all in Evernote in this structured system. And now I'm just going to be like, okay, all these golden nuggets that I've been digging my whole life for, I'm going to give them out on my YouTube channel. So follow me on my journey as I do that. I'd love to have you all there.
Oh, you're like Willy Wonka, right? You're just going to be giving it away, the golden tickets to everything. But no, we really appreciate it because you make a lot of things accessible and you make people think about things they might not otherwise have even encountered. And then you make them want to learn more. You kind of set people on journeys. And I will say that in book club and on the podcast that you've been on before with this, I've gotten so many messages and notes from people that say, I love that candle. I have told everybody about, so it's great. You're really making a huge difference and we applaud you for that. And we're so happy that you do it here on our channel. It's amazing. So thank you. Thank you. It was excellent. All right, everybody.
Thank you. My
Please
pleasure.
comment.
Yeah, let's do that boundary episode.
No, we're going to do the boundaries
some
one.
other
Yep.
topics. Yeah.
Yep. This one just popped up before that one, or we would have done the boundaries one next. But, like I said, it's not, we need more cowbell. It's, we need more Kendel. So we're committed. It's going to be great.
Happy to do it. Loved you guys.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's going to be good. So please comment, everybody, and let us know. Were you aware of this book before? What about this concept? Or what do you find as a post-or nuanced Mormon that you give an F about more now than you ever did before? And is that making a difference in informing your decisions and your relationships and all of those things? I mean, we love to hear from you guys. And I think we all benefit from talking with each other about that. So please comment. We love that. Please like and subscribe to Mormonish Podcast. And if you'd like to be made aware when new episodes come out, you can hit that notification bell and it'll let you know. If you'd like to help financially support the podcast, We have links in the show notes to Donor Box, and we just absolutely appreciate every one of you that do. It is the highlight of my day. If I go into my email and I have this little, oh, look, somebody's given a little bit, it means that we're making a difference, and it means that you like our content, and we love it, and we love you guys, and we appreciate it so much. So thank you so much. We also have links in our show notes to our Mormonish merch store if you want to grab some of our fun items that we have that you show your Mormonish pride, right? I guess that's how you say it. So anyway, thank you again, Landon, for co-hosting, and thank you once again, Kendel, for being amazing as you always are. And if anybody is interested in joining the Good Book Club, we have so much fun over there. It's all virtual, people all over the world, every second Sunday, 11 a.m., a different book every month. The book coming up in October is Armageddon by Bart Ehrman. Nothing more perfect for Halloween time. This is an incredible book. If you guys would like to come join us, grab a copy of that book, start reading. You can send me an email at thegoodbookclub@mail.com, not Gmail, but mail. And I'll put you on our list for all the links and the other notes and notifications. You can also just find us on Facebook. We're called The Good Book Club for Post-Mormons. And you can check us out because we love to read. We kind of deconstruct through reading. We have the idea, now we know what we don't believe. Let's figure out what we do believe, and we do that through reading, and we welcome new members. It's super fun, a really fun environment with, I'm telling you, super smart people. Oh my gosh, it's amazing. It is incredible, and a great and wonderful meeting every second Sunday. So, all right, everybody, thanks again, and we'll see you next time on Mormonish. Thanks, Kendel. Thanks, Landon. Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of Mormonish. We really appreciate our listeners and would love to hear from you if you have a story you'd like to share. You can email us at mormonishpodcast@gmail.com. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, and on our website, mormonishpodcast.org. And don't forget to look for us on YouTube and like and subscribe. Keep joyful, everybody.